Productivity. Gladiator.
I'm Brian Nelson Palmer. On this show, I share personal, practical productivity skills that will make you more productive and advance your career. And in this episode, we're talking about why smart people still have bad productivity habits and how to finally change them. And with me on the show today is Courtney Clark, who is a resilience author and speaker who specializes in changing habits and finally making that change and being resilient. Courtney, thanks so much for joining me on the show today.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here, Brian.
And for those folks who aren't familiar with you or haven't heard of you before, talk about how you're relevant to our topic today.
So I am not a productivity expert. I put all of that on your shoulders. My research is about resilience and adapting to change.
Oh.
And so I got into this field. I'm actually a 4-time 9/11 related cancer survivor.
4 times.
4 times. Well, yeah, because of turns out that 9/11 exposure, the cancer keeps coming back. But because of the cancer, they found the brain aneurysm that was about to hemorrhage. Yeah. So I cared a lot about resilience and I started studying it. And at first, you think like resilience is really all about positivity, that attitude. And the more I looked at it, the more I was like, I don't think it's really about positivity. I think it's about adaptability. So now I work with organizations to help them be more adaptable to change. But what we've discovered in our research, we research teams, we just completed another research study of over 1,000 working Americans. We're finding that this idea of grit, never give up. You can do anything you put your mind to. It's making us less flexible and less adaptable to change.
Interesting.
Did anybody in your life ever teach you never give up?
Oh, well, I mean, as you're saying that, I'm going, yeah, I think there's a lot of people that lean really hard into that set your mind to something and you can do anything and I think that's really true and it's important for kids to learn. And I think that's a really important message. And where does being flexible and adapting to change and remembering to change come in?
Okay. Well, I think you're right. Perseverance is incredibly important. We want children to persevere, to be persistent and not give up, at the first sign or the slightest sign of an obstacle. But we also have limited resources in the world. And so the way this relates to productivity is that if we keep spending our limited resources, our time, our money, our health, people resources on beating our fists against a brick wall, then we're not going to have those resources to spend where they might pay off better. Research into motivation tells us that goal commitment is a finite resource.
Yep.
That means we have to be choosy about our goals.
Absolutely. I'm having 2 competing thoughts right along this topic that I'm looking forward to our conversation. The first one is that there's that whole Strengths Finder 2.0 idea where you find people's strengths and as a leader, you push them to use more of their strengths. And then that contrasts with the idea that you have a performance review and you tell everybody how they need to improve. And so then people spend all this time trying to bring up the things that they're not good at instead of being even more dominant at the things that they're great at. And I think that there's an adaptability and a resilience piece in there that that juxtaposition, that comparison right there is that's a thing that people
100%,
face.
100%. I would respond with the meme, ¿por qué no los dos? Right? There's some really good research that says that. They were talking about children, actually. And they were saying that so much of what we do to kids who are struggling is we buffer those weaknesses. But what they found was really the right balance was to an extent to build up where the weakness was, right? Get a kid who's failing, not failing.
Yeah.
But then back off. Don't try to take a kid who's failing to an A kid. Get them passing the class, but then lean into their skills and abilities because then that's what's going to get them into college and get them scholarships. Getting them from a failing student to a slightly better than mediocre student is probably not going to have as big of an impact on their lives as getting them to where they can succeed. They're not failing, but then letting them invest in what makes them special and unique, what lights them up and turns them on. And that's what's going to drive them forward. So kind of in that same way, what I want people to do is balance grit resilience with what I'm calling growth resilience. And growth resilience, that's that adapting, pivoting, figuring out a new way to do our work when the old ways of working aren't working anymore.
Yeah. You know, the other thing that comes to mind on this topic too is that I, like with Productivity Gladiator, I have systems and tools and resources that solve the problems. Like it's one of those things where from where I sit, I hand you the solution to your problem. Mm-hmm. And then people go back to their office and they go back to doing what they're doing and they don't use the solution to the problem. It's the one of the recent episodes, if you go back in the show, we talked about planning your week in advance. Planning your week in advance, 94% of people know that planning your week in advance is a productivity superpower. It's a great thing to do. And less than 1% of people actually do it. That's the piece. So anyway, that's what I'm stoked about for what you're talking about.
We are all very brilliant at solving other people's problems. I mean, right? I mean, I have girlfriends where I'm like, just let me pick your dates for you, okay? It would go so much better.
True. Yep.
Yes. We are brilliant at solving other people's problems. That is certainly a thing. I think the big gap that people need to be aware of here is that what we found in our research is there is a massive gap between what we know in theory to be true and what we're willing to do about it. So much like you say, we may know that we should plan our week in advance, but we don't do it. Think of all the things in life that is true of. So I use the analogy like, I want a clean house. I do not want to clean my house. I want to be stronger. I'm so busy. I can't go to the gym, right? I want to eat healthy. I want that cheesecake. I want to save money. I want to go on vacation. But we are aware of the gap. We know that the gap is there. And even when we make the wrong choice, we can tell ourselves, Brian, I'm not using that productivity tool because I'm a special snowflake. You don't understand my situation. This thing happened and it got in my way and I didn't do it, right? I didn't clean my house because I know that I want a clean house more than I want to clean my house. I am aware of that gap. What we found in this research about change and grit is that people are not aware of the gap. 98% of people loved the idea of being adaptable. They understood that in order to be successful, we sometimes have to change our plans to reach our goals. They were all in on adaptability as a concept. And then when we asked about the behaviors of adaptability, things like changing a strategic plan when we aren't meeting our benchmarks, letting go of goals that are no longer possible. We found that all told, 64% of working Americans said, no, quitters never win. I'm just going to keep doing the same thing. And if I work hard, it's bound to work out because that's what I was taught. That's a lot of people. So we're all in on the idea of adaptability as a concept, but not as a behavior. We think that because we feel okay with change, that we're going to choose change when it's an option.
Yeah.
And
I'm thinking for you listening, I think you can look around right now really recently and see exactly what you're talking about right now, Courtney, in action with who is using AI in their job. Look around your workplace because that's change. That's something different. That's a pivot from the way you've always done things. And this is a productivity habit that will change your life. It's a huge thing. how many people, no, that doesn't apply to me, ignore it. How many people they like, oh, I don't really understand how that gets to me. And instead of like adaptable, look into it, find ways to getting on that bandwagon, you know, the big phrase from the very beginning, the big worry and the thing that comes up is AI isn't going to take your job. People who using AI to do your job will take your job. And that idea, and yet still some folks don't pivot. So that's really interesting. And that kind of sets the stage for Courtney where I want to go, which is, okay, why do smart, capable people who know exactly what they should be doing still struggle with bad productivity habits, things that aren't serving them? Like what? Why?
Let me offer you a lens, though, to what you just said.
Okay.
Because you pointed out, like, people know they should be using AI. I don't know that that's a complete sentence, though, Brian. So I want to push back because, yes, AI can make you more productive. I just saw some research a week before last that was showing how overall, while there's a lot of AI that makes you more productive, many people who use AI are finding that they're going down the rabbit hole and they're getting like caught up and now I'm going to do this and now I'm going to do this. And it's like the new version of cat videos. So every beauty has a beast. And I absolutely think AI tools can make you more productive, but I think AI tools can make you less productive. And you have to figure out where to invest your resources. And that's kind of what I'm talking about, is that resources are limited. I came at this research because I literally realized like my lifetime might be limited, but everybody's resources are limited. And so we have to be incredibly smart about what resources we're investing where. So to the extent that AI can shave some time off of this, but you have to also be very strategic, because you could also waste a lot of time or a lot of resources training your people or all these things on AI. And then that wasn't the right path.
Agreed. That makes sense.
Yeah. I think as a blanket statement, we have to be careful with that. And that's part of what this research is teaching me, is like, of course, grit is good.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, but we can overuse it. And then we're like, no, make this work out because quitters never win.
So I want to know then, what is the balance? Because I grew up in the, stick with it, grit, you can outwork them. Like I came from that upbringing in that life. So and then the flip side to that is the totally adaptable, where you don't stick with anything and you just keep shifting and changing. And so now there's clearly a balance in there. So Courtney, where is that line?
So the balance really is, and what I talk about in the research is that a lot of times we have a strategy we know that we need a strategy once we've hit a brick wall, right? If you've hit a brick wall, if you got rejected from every single job, right? That's a brick wall. Or every single college, like that's a brick wall. And then we're like, oh, I need a new strategy. What I'm going to tell you is we need a strategy before that. We need to start implementing a strategy on the front end while we're still on the path. And this path may turn out to work out great, but we need a strategy so that we're paying attention to any potential signs. Because you're right, we've been culturally conditioned to ignore the signs and just be like, I'm not going to quit, and ignore all the signs. So here's how you don't ignore the signs. You start by doing an inventory, I'll call it, about what resources you have to put towards your goal. So resources, of course, are, time and money, support system, mentorship, all of that. Put that in your list of resources. Then you want to do some research. What resources does it typically take? Anything that's a number. So if it's like money, time, those are all numbers. I recommend a range, because so like if I asked you, okay, Brian, how long does it take to get an undergraduate degree?
4 years.
Right. That's the common answer, 4 years. We all know some overachiever who did it in 3, and you know somebody who took the scenic route and did it in 5. So if you only account for 4 years, you might find yourself being like, oh, wait, I didn't know that. So put a range in there rather than be specific. So then you're going to look at those 2 columns, right? What resources does it take? What resources do I have? I also recommend that you start with the resources do I have first. The reason is our brains can do a little thing. If I write down the resources that it takes and then I write down the resources that I have, can't we all imagine ourselves being like, I mean, I don't really have that yet, but like I probably will because that's what it takes.
No, that's true. Yeah.
If we start by like putting what you have on paper, so then you compare, right? Obviously, you're going to compare. Do I have what it takes? Do I want to give what it takes? And this one I learned, I have a friend, Amber. So we met when we were late 20s. By the time we were 30, Amber was just that person who was doing it all. Absolute rock star. She was married. She had 2 kids. She just finished her master's degree. She was on 2 nonprofit boards of directors, C-suite at work. Just amazing. And I was like, Amber, how do you do it all? And I was expecting a productivity answer. I really thought she was going to tell me something about time management, like a great calendar or something. And the answer that she gave me changed my relationship to resource management forever. She said, every yes is a no to something else. And I may not even know what I'm saying no to until that commitment is already made. So I always think about, Amber, just that idea that like every pursuit has a price and you have to understand what you're paying or you end up paying double, right? If all we see is the pursuit and not the price, then we're not going to be very smart. So we can be unstoppable, but we're not going to be very smart. And so the final thing that I really recommend of like, how do you know? How do you decide if you should keep walking this path or not? Is that you set benchmarks. So, benchmarks, that's like, okay, am I meeting the smaller goals along the way that tell me that I should continue on doing this? And a lot of people will say like, oh, I don't want to set benchmarks. I'll know if I'm being successful. Or they'll say, oh, benchmarks, well, I can set those later. I don't really know what good benchmarks would be until I'm already working towards it. But your brain is not actually great at doing that. Once we start pursuing a goal, your brain flips from evaluative mindset into implementation mindset. And it's really hard to stop implementation mindset once you're in it. It's like the Energizer Bunny. It just wants to keep going and going.
So, Courtney, that kind of brings up a good point for me, which is one of the things I've noticed about myself, or the adaptations I had to make along this line. Is I was raised in the go, 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 don't quit, persevere, that mentality. And what I noticed
71% of Americans were.
Yeah. And what I noticed about myself as I got older is that wasn't serving me a lot of the times. It wasn't serving me in my relationships, in my love life, in my friends, in my career, it wasn't serving me. And so two things happened. First, I realized at work that I needed to leverage my boss and I needed to come up for air at some point, because I equate to like, I'm really good at putting my head down and power through. Like I could power through with the best of them. And what I need to do is have checkpoints where I come up for air and look around and go, okay, boss, I came this far all the way to here. Am I still even going in the right direction? Or do I need to redirect? And so professionally, that was and that sounds kind of like the milestones in what you're talking about with
100%. That's the good of benchmarks is like, okay, am I still making the progress that I thought I was making? Am I still making the progress that a typical person would be making? Does this still make sense? And if we don't set those benchmarks while we're still in evaluative mindset, when we're like not quite as committed yet, and we're able to smartly evaluate ourselves, if we don't have those benchmarks to sort of run up against, we're never going to stop. We're going to convince ourselves, but we found in the research, so we asked salespeople, we said, if you are more than halfway through the year, but less than halfway to your goal, what do you do? And they said,
work harder.
Keep doing the same thing. That's what so much of the research showed us, is that everybody goes like, well, yeah, I'll just put my head down and just work a little harder. And that over and over again was the story, versus I really need to reconsider if this makes sense.
Yeah.
So yes, we want to be able to put our heads down and push through, because sometimes that is the right answer, but it's not always the right answer. If you think about the people for whom hard work paid off, Olympians, right? The people at the top of their game, they pushed through and they worked and it paid off. And at the same time, they were working really hard on their very specialized skill. There were other things that they had to let fall by the wayside because resources are limited. So they did those things, but they didn't do other things. So many people, right? Top of their game professionally, never married, or their kids don't speak to them, or,
right.
That's when you look at what I'm saying about the resources being limited, it kind of pans out. And so we need to have a system to be able to do both. Of course, we want to dig in.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of situations where that matters and it's going to pay off. But we also have to be able to branch out when we hit that obstacle.
Now, what if you're a leader of a team then? If you are you are watching somebody like me who's work, and then at least I come up for air and I ask the question. But like, if you're a supervisor, you're calling them milestones or benchmarks.
Yep.
What does it look like to be a good leader who supports their people, doesn't get in the way, but also has those benchmarks or those moments? Is it just as simple as a weekly one-on-one where you ask them how they're doing, or like, is there more to it? Paint me a picture. What does that look like?
Well, anything with leading people is probably never that simple in any respect.
Fair enough.
But what we found that was really interesting is that leaders, on the one hand, are really good at seeing the big picture. Leaders often get more information than their reports do. So they reported feeling like they understood the big picture and the need for change better. And leaders reported being grittier. And when leaders were confronted with, what do you do? Do you change? Leaders were less likely to abandon a plan that wasn't working. And I guess it makes sense, because if you're a leader, like, maybe that was your plan. If that was a leader, your success might be judged on how well we stick to the strategic plan. But what that means is that leaders can sometimes be the worst culprits of holding their people back from change. So we found a huge opportunity there in leaders really being willing to, again, strike that balance between maybe we do need to invest more resources and work a little harder, or maybe we need to evaluate. And there's not a single right answer, but it's going to come in that resource evaluation, those benchmarks. But leaders could really stand across the board to do a better job of considering, is this the right goal? I know it's in the strategic plan, but is this the right goal? Or if we're struggling, and if everybody, right, if the same one person is always struggling, it's probably that person. But if everybody's struggling, if people who often aren't struggling are struggling, that tells me it's probably the goal. And maybe that's not the right goal, or maybe the goal needs to be reevaluated. And that's where I talk about, so we've got, right, we talked about the strategy for digging in, that we want to make sure if we're digging in the right place, that we're evaluating our resources and setting those benchmarks. But if we hit a roadblock, there's another strategy that we can use. And this is what I call the shortcut. So I mentioned like, maybe this goal isn't the right goal. The first thing that I think people should do if they sense that they're digging in on the wrong goal is really look at that goal and see if it's the right size. Because a lot of times, if you have to give up on a goal, the problem is that the goal was too small. Did you think I was going to say too big?
Yeah.
Yes, I saw your face. No.
I was ready for too small. Yes. Okay. Or ready for too big. Okay.
But here's why I say that. Because what often happens is we confuse goals and plans. A lot of what we call a goal is actually a plan. And you can tell the difference like this. Ready? If there's just one way to get there, if it's like A to B, right, I'm going to fill this out and then I'm going to do this. And then once that's done, this will happen. And that's a plan.
That's a plan.
That's a plan. So for me, for example, I always thought I was going to have a baby. And then I was diagnosed with cancer at age 26. Can't do that. And I told myself, it's fine. Like, you're young, you're 26. You can always foster, or you can mentor. You can be a really cool aunt, do a lot of volunteer work. Maybe someday they'll let somebody with your health history adopt. And so I did some volunteer work and met a teenage boy and ultimately adopted a teenager. And I also mentor. I do a ton of volunteer work. And so that is called when you take what you thought was your goal, but you realize it's just a plan. What I realized is my goal was not to have a baby or even to be a mom. My actual goal was bigger. My actual goal is to leave a legacy. That's really what I want, Brian. Like, I don't know how long I'm going to get on this planet, but I want to know that when I'm gone, I'm leaving a legacy.
Yep.
And that is called supersizing your goal. So you take what you thought was your goal, and maybe it's not achievable anymore, but you take that goal and you supersize it to the largest thing that it means, the biggest expression of it. And for me, that was leaving a legacy. And so that supersize goal, that's a real goal. It's not a plan, right? And then that's step one. And then step two, you build parallel plans to reach your supersized goal. A lot of different ways to get there. So for me, the way that looked, I adopted, I volunteer, and I mentor, and I've started 2 nonprofits, and I've written 4 books. So this most recent book about this new research just came out. All of these are parallel plans to my supersized goal.
To leave a legacy.
Yes, to leave a legacy. Because that's actually the reason, that was the motivation behind the goal of have a baby.
Yeah.
And so there's so many different ways you can think about it. But like, somebody goes, oh, I want to save $10,000. My goal is to save $10,000 this year. Money goals, super common.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the supersized goal would be what? I'd probably say feel more financially secure. That's the super. So save $10,000 is one parallel plan, but you could also cut back on spending, could control you could hire a financial advisor, right? There's lots of different ways. And then at the end of the year, what happens if you only save $9,500 in the bank, but you probably cut a bunch of spending, more than $500, and you hired a financial advisor? So like your investments look really good. So all told, you actually did more than $10,000. If you just looked at that one path, you'd be like, oh, I'm a failure.
I want to pivot this then to let's talk about some productivity habits that are really common things that I hear people say and that we say and that kind of thing. And let's use those as examples. So one of the easiest examples is email inbox to 0. And it's true. I have a system. I can help you get to inbox to 0. By the end of the session, you're at 0, and we can maintain it at 0, and I can teach you that skill. And it's an interesting pivot to say that goal is too small, because it's not about the 0 as much as it's about the feeling of being on top of things. It's the feeling of not feeling like I let people down because I didn't miss it. Like I'm on it. For me, accountability is a thing. Like you asked and I did not forget you.
Inbox zero for you, right? I'd call that a parallel plan, right? Rather than the goal. So, but the supersized goal for you to have inbox zero and for me might be different, because for you, it might be that feeling of peace, right? I can go to sleep at night knowing that there's not like something that I left hanging out there. And for me, yeah, it might be, I know I didn't miss anything. Or for me, it might be, I don't know, the idea that, all my opportunities, all my chickens have gone home to roost. Like whatever it is, the greater meaning of it is different, could be different for you and for me. The way I think about when you're trying to come up with like the supersized goal, like what is this really about, is actually, you know what it is for me? Inbox zero, and I love an inbox zero. I love an inbox zero. For me, inbox zero is what makes me feel like a business owner, like I'm handling my stuff.
Yep.
Right? That's like when I do that, then I feel like I'm not just like a punch in a time. I feel like a leader. Yeah. That's why I do it. I've never thought about it until we just are having this conversation, but that's what inbox zero does for me. So yeah, the best way to find what your supersized goal is, think in terms of taking ABC goals and turning them into VIP goals. So ABC goals, that's achievement, behavior, comparison, right? Achievements like I want to accomplish this, or, win a prize or whatever. So like for me, I want to be a badass boss. Like that's an achievement. B is behavior, habits, right? So that might be what it is for you, right? Start this, stop this. So, and then C is comparison. Someone else is doing this, I want to do it, or, I want to follow in my dad's footsteps. So ABC goals. ABC goals are fine. They're great goals. Most people's goals are ABC goals. They have gotten us the level of success we have today, but they are not supersized goals. So they run the risk of maybe being plans. So turn those ABC goals into VIP goals. Values, ideals, purpose. What values do you hold that led you to set that goal that you thought was a goal, right? What ideals do you hold that you think that this goal is going to allow you to live out? What purpose do you think your work has on this planet? And then once you start thinking of those VIP words, for me, legacy, then that's your supersized goal.
Yeah. What do you do with that supersized goal? Do you write that down somewhere? I mean, this sounds like it, and you listening, you've probably seen this before, because this screams vision board to me. Like when I think about VIP goals and bigger goals and that kind of thing, it's the vision board of what you want your life to be like, and you put these big sky high things on there. And then, like you're saying, there's like 10 different paths to get there, that kind of thing.
Well, that's the key too, right? It's not, if we stop at the big vision, then we're not building ourselves the strategy to necessarily get there. So yes, this supersized goal, put it on a vision board, write it wherever you want to write it. Know that it's the red thread that has probably been weaving through your life already. This is, you may be saying this word for the first time. You may be recognizing how this is influencing the goals that you've set, the paths that you've taken over the years. And you might not have even known it, but it was there. It was driving you, right? It's like that heartbeat that you always actually had, but now you can put words to it. And now you can be intentional. Isn't it intentional? That's like the thing all the kids are saying. Be intentional. Right now you can intentionally pursue it with these parallel plans. And I think it's really important to note also, parallel plans are not backup. Former performer, I have big beef with the word backup plans. I don't like it. It seems like, oh, that's my safety school. But in fact, there's actually really good research, maybe you've seen it, that talks about how having a fallback plan might actually make you less successful because you're like,
Oh,
oh, I
yeah.
don't need to do this, right? I have something I can fall back on. Parallel plans, not the same as backup plans, because backup plans are taking you somewhere else, somewhere different that you're like, well, that'd be okay too. Parallel plans, they're all going the same direction. Maybe like you've got this one and you're like, boy, I really hope that this works. But if it doesn't, I've got this and I've got this, and that's all fine because they're all going the same direction towards legacy or towards
Yeah.
financial security. And maybe you're really leaning heavy into one, or maybe you're deploying 3 or 4 at a time. And
Yeah.
that's the route. So that's step 3 of the shortcut, right? We set that parallel plan, we set that supersized goal, we build those parallel plans, and then step 3 is you just flex between the plans as needed. You just kind of move back and forth. Take one of these. There's no favorite child, right? We love them all. Whatever gets us there works.
Yeah.
And that to me is so exciting because that's closing that gap. You know, we talked about that gap between what we want. Like we're good with adaptability. We're like, yes,
Yeah.
we can change.
Yeah.
But when it comes right down to it, we're not actually doing it. This is how we close that gap. This is how we get to doing it, by building this strategy.
Yeah.
Because it's not enough to just like feel like you're okay with change. We have to do something.
Yeah. Flex between them. I like that. So
Yeah.
zoom out,
Well,
bigger goal, multiple paths, flex between them.
Yes, flex between them. And I know, yeah, and especially for leaders. So if you're listening, if you lead people, manage anyone, if you're a parent, I think that it's really important to pay attention. We found that while older generations reported being grittier, like just as a personality type, but we also found that those older generations felt more comfortable going to another path when their old path wasn't available. So that was a really interesting dichotomy. But what we realized in questioning is that those older folks, they relied a lot on grit. Older generations that were definitely taught, they were hammered home that grit. But because they've been around and lived a lot of life, they have already been in many situations where it doesn't turn out the way they planned. They had to pivot and it turned out okay. So they have more confidence in their ability to find a new path. Younger generations reported the least confidence in their ability to find a new path. So as leaders, think about if you then know how to help them, you can help them identify the supersized goal, right? You have values as an organization or as a team, and then you help them, you show them what the strategy is of like building parallel plans. And then we got this, but then we could do this, and we've got this other option. Now they're not going to be as stuck when things don't turn out the way they planned.
Yep.
So it's not just about like motivating them with a fresh attitude. It's like bolstering that attitude with strategy and action steps. And you can teach them to actually be more adaptable by teaching them how to adapt.
Yeah. You know, now that we went down this really interesting path, and like, this was it's really helpful, Courtney, to kind of see that the goal was too small. That was a great, I feel like you slapped me there for that was like, ooh, slap, like, oh, it's too small. I want to circle back and go back to, all right. So in the very beginning, my burning question that I had that I wanted to talk with you about, I want to get your thoughts on, circling back to that now, why smart people still have bad productivity habits and how to finally change them. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think smart people have bad productivity habits because I do think that smart people, when you have been successful, it is really easy to believe what's they say, like what got you here won't get you there. It's really easy to believe that your success is solely as a result of your hard work, your habits, right? I have set my whole life up for success. And that is great. But maybe circumstances have changed. Maybe maybe what you have at your disposal has changed. And so you haven't changed and your strategies and your structures haven't changed. And you're like, but these should still be good.
Yeah. So Courtney, I'm drawing an interesting comparison here because it's something that I've always called it. And I love this example of what got me here. And then you get into leadership and people look up to you and ask, how did you get there? And you give them advice on how you got there. And I feel like there's a really important lesson here because I am a big subscriber to I call it learning by committee. And what I mean is one person's advice isn't necessarily the right advice. It's advice. Like if they've been there, like if you're trying to get promoted or you're trying to get to the next level and you talk to the person above you about how they got there, that is some advice. So having nothing versus having that one is helpful. But
Yes.
then if you get 2, 3, 4 other perspectives and you learn by committee, and then you can choose which of those is the right one for you, that makes a much better plan to get to the better spot, whether that's email inbox to 0 or whether it's, any of these productivity habits that you've been working on. If you have a productivity habit that isn't working, then ask more than go for multiple perspectives on that thing so that you drive toward those multiple different solutions. And then you choose the 1 or 2 or 3 that you want to use. And so I say this, there's 2 important takeaways that I hope you take from this. The first one is, if you're giving advice, encourage people to go get more advice. Look for the angles, look for the different pieces.
Well, and there's something really interesting about what you said there too, because it's nearly impossible to reverse engineer someone else's path. And the reasons for that are many, right? I'm a different person than you. My strengths and your strengths are different. I started doing what I do this many years ago. So me telling somebody else, it's a different environment now. And so somebody coming up as a leader would be like, well, how do I do this? Well, it's a little different. The other reason it's really hard to reverse engineer someone else's success or to give advice if you're the one being asked is there's something called peak end effect. So people tend to only remember the highs, the lows, and the most recent thing that happened. We are much better at predicting, in fact, the causes of our failures than we are the causes of our successes. Often because the causes of our failures are a little more proximate. Like we gotta know, like I did something and it bit the big one. I know what I did that caused that failure. We attribute our success, and this is what you're talking about. We attribute our success to our habits, right? I built this great system. I succeeded only because I have a great system and I worked really hard and I'm really smart. And what we are not as great at relaying is that long, slow climb to success. So peak end effect says we remember the highs, the lows, and then that most recent success or the most recent thing that happened. We tell people if somebody says, Courtney, how did you get to be successful? I'm going to be able to say, well, this was the low, but then this was the high. And I'm not so great at being like, well, here are the 1 million times I picked up the phone and made a phone call. And here's just what the slog of my day looked like. And so it can be very hard to reverse engineer people's success because we're not great reporters at it. And we are not great at predicting which of the pieces of the puzzle actually made us successful. But the answer is all of the pieces of the puzzle. The habits are part of it.
Yeah.
Our choices, what we do, in my case, when you hit that brick wall, when you're up against an obstacle, the choices that you make, it's all a part of it.
Yeah. So I want to ask the best question that I always love to kind of ask at the end of all these great discussions is, okay, now what's the one thing that you'd tell the person listening to do this week? If they only do one thing from this whole great conversation that we had, what do you hope that the person listening is going to do right now?
I think the best thing that you can do is find your supersized goal. The supersized goal. So even if you're not being called on to like change or adapt or anything right now, that supersized goal, that is what motivates you if the days are long or the clients are annoying or the kids are screaming or the whatever. Like that is the North Star.
Yeah.
If you can keep that in mind, there's not a lot you can't navigate. And when you are being called on to change something, if something is not successful, then knowing that supersized goal, that's what gets you on that fresh path.
Yeah, I like that a lot. North Star, supersized goal. You know, it's funny, there's back in the archives of this show, I had another guest talk about North Star, and it was an interesting, this has come up multiple times. And it's funny because these concepts like finding your North Star, finding your big goal, they call them bags, big, hairy, audacious goals. You've heard all kinds of names for the stuff that we're talking about here. And it's interesting because it's helpful to hear it. It's back to that learning by committee thing. I've heard this so many times in my professional life, in my adult life. And every time I hear it, it hits different.
When people hear this, they're not like, oh my God, this makes no sense. I've never heard anything like this anymore. When people, when we get in a conversation about like, honestly, we've been over indexing on grit and it's keeping us from being adaptable. Everybody lights up and they're like, wow, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I've been never giving up and it's kept me in jobs or relationships that weren't working long past their expiration date. And so most people get it.
Yeah.
It's the what to do next piece that I felt compelled to continue researching and add to the conversation.
Yep. I love that. Absolutely. Really good. I love the really good nuggets here. Like the learning by committee. I hope you're taking that away, and the bigger goals and the multiple paths and the not a fallback plan, but a different plan. Good stuff, Courtney. This is very cool. So I guess ultimately here to kind of bring us to a close, Courtney, here's what I love. I love that you did all this research and that your bigger super goal in the end brought you here to write these books and do this research so that we could have this conversation and talk about this stuff.
Well, I think it is incredibly relevant to what you were talking about as well, because like continuing to just bang your fist against a brick wall because perseverance, like that's nobody's idea of efficient. So if we can find the shortcut, if we can find the way around our obstacles to maybe a bigger goal, right? That supersized goal, instead of just continuing to say, but let me in because I worked hard for this. I think that we are going to find that we've conserved our resources so we can spend them in a more valuable way.
For sure. I love that. For those folks that want to keep in touch with you or find you online or find out more about you, where's the best place for them to go?
Go to CourtneyClark.com. You will find me there. You can email me there. You can social media me there. And all of this research that we talked about today is found in my new book, The Shortcut, which you can get on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, all your book places.
Love it.
To have a ton of time to read because you are so productive.
Yes, absolutely. Do it. Read the book. I love it. And for you tuning in, think about someone in your life who struggles with this topic of beating their head against the wall who came to mind when she said, like, put your head down, grit, like, because my gosh, I immediately thought of one or two of my friends. And
2/3 of people said they know someone who has so much grit that it's negatively impacting their life.
There it is. And for that person in your life, maybe it's a colleague or a friend or even somebody you haven't talked to in a while, would you share this episode specifically with them? Because I know that Courtney and I would love to know that our conversation helped someone who needed to hear this. And frankly, we'd love to be your excuse to reconnect or continue to connect with that person. So please do send it over. And also, if you want more productivity insights beyond just this podcast, my email subscribers get access to everything that I create. So come join that email list if you haven't already. And I love sharing Productivity Gladiator with you, because together, these productivity skills are going to change your life. That's a wrap.
Productivity. Gladiator.